This side or that end? I thought she said this one here. This side. So, hi everyone. Thank you for braving the possibly second hottest day of the year, or maybe the hottest day of the year. I'm not sure what it is, but it's lovely and cool in here. So, what an amazing place to be. But yes, thanks so much for coming along. My name's Mex. I'm co-founder of Women in the Food Industry. Some of you are members and some of you already know me, but basically we're a social impact company who are championing women across the entire food industry. So that doesn't just mean chefs or catering or the culinary world, it means food producers, like all the amazing producers that you see over there. Plus we work with nutritionists, food policy experts, food writers, farmers, fishermen, and lots and lots of other people who work, across the entire industry. So I've got this amazing panel, which Katya's already hinted about what we'll be talking about today. But I think I'd like to get them to introduce themselves first off, because they'll be able to do it far better than I can. So I'm going to start with you, Jenny G. We've got two Jennies here.
Hi, I'm Jenny Goodman, and the kind of medicine I practiced until I tried to retire a couple of years ago is called ecological medicine. And it's ecological in the sense that it sees the whole body as one joined up ecosystem, but it also sees the body as part of the wider system that is planet Earth. So, we breathe the air, we drink the water, we eat the food that's grown in the soil. What goes around comes around. So whatever's in the planet, it's in us. Whatever's missing from the soil, it's missing from us.
And I'm the other Jenny T. So I'm a nutritionist and a cookbook author. So I've written several cookbooks, mainly trying to make cooking from scratch more accessible. And so I've written books for the oven, one pan, and then one pot for the multi-cooker, so pressure cooker, and then air fryer cookbooks as well. And I've got a real focus right now on the removal or reduction, hopefully removal, but reduction perhaps is a more achievable goal of ultra processed ingredients in our diet, because I'm absolutely horrified by the degree to which they've made their way into particularly the UK diet. Compare our diet to the Italian diet and you'd be horrified. The amount of ultra processed foods in our diet here in the UK is shocking. So it's lovely to be in a room full of ultra processed free everything.
Hi everyone, I'm Francesca. So I'm a fertility naturopath and medical herbalist. So I also view the body as one system, and that nothing is not linked. Basically everything is linked, and I take an approach that taking a natural approach to fertility is not an alternative option, it's a foundational approach, really, that we work, with IVF and with modern medicine as well. But I am also a co-founder of Future Women, and we are a women's hormone health testing company that uses urine-based testing. So it's really comprehensive hormone testing that gives you information so far past what a blood test would give you. It gives you your levels of your hormones, the detox pathways, some nutrient levels, your cortisol, your stress. It kind of, again, the approach that you can't understand the human body with just hormones. We're more than just our hormones. We are our stress and our oxidative stress levels and our cortisol and our nutrients, and we are so much more complex than just our hormones. So I can go into that a bit more later as well, but I'm so happy to be here.
Great, thanks all. So we're actually going to be trying to break down what are really actually quite complex topics, things like toxins, hormones, lifestyle changes, and hopefully at the end of the day you'll go away with like real tips that you can actually use, because you start talking about things like hormones and toxins and you think, oh my God, I'm not going to understand that. But hopefully these ladies here will help you with that. So I'm going to start first question with Dr. Jenny G. So could you start off by explaining how everyday environmental toxins, like from plastics to pesticides, disrupt our hormonal systems, especially in relation to fertility?
Okay, strap in for this. So these things are everywhere. As I say, you can't poison the planet without poisoning the people. We have been doing both. Let's start with the pesticides. It is perfectly possible to grow all our food, vegetable and animal, organically without synthetic pesticides and without synthetic fertilizers. And I've been speaking a lot to farmers, and they are doing this. The only obstacles are economic and political. There are no botanical obstacles to doing it, right? We've been eating organically for about 1 million, 2 million, 3 million years. So it can be done. And here are the reasons for doing it. Pesticides were developed from nerve gases that were used in both world wars. And come 1945, the pesticide manufacturers could have said, okay, the nerve gas manufacturers could have said, there's no call for this product anymore, but they repurposed it and called it insecticide, pesticide, fungicide, herbicide. The side, C-I-D-E bit at the end means it kills. It kills. So they are collectively biocides, inimical to physiology of humans and all other living things. And they kill the good bacteria in the soil, they kill the good bacteria in our gut, but because they are derived from nerve gases, they are primarily neurotoxic. So they damage the brain of the baby in the womb, they damage children's brains, they damage our brains. Also, they are estrogen mimics, and that's the way in which they're endocrine disruptive. And it's really weird. They're not the same shape as the molecule of estrogen, but they have enough similarity that they sit on the estrogen receptors, which both men and women have in every cell of the body. And they're very linked, strongly linked to everything from premenstrual syndrome to breast cancer to prostate cancer in men. So clearly they're not going to be good for the fetus in the womb. They are, of course, also a form of petrochemicals. Plastics are another form of petrochemicals. And I've got a large chunk in chapter 3 of my new book about how we can get the plastics out of our lives, out of our homes, and therefore out of our bodies. Because I think we all know that plastic's choking the ocean, it's killing the fish and the birds. It's also killing us. And it's one of the very few things that's almost impossible to detox, right? I mean, my colleagues and I can detox the pesticides out of your system. We can detox the heavy metals, which oddly also act as estrogen mimics, right? Mercury, aluminium, nickel, lead, cadmium. But it's very hard to detox plastics. It doesn't break down in the sense of biodegrading. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller bits, microplastics, then nanoplastics. And the way to deal with this is to stop producing the plastic. And the way to get the producers to stop producing is to stop buying it, right? And there's almost everything in your home and on your body, because synthetic clothing is essentially plastic, can be replaced by natural, herbal stuff that grows. Okay, so it's perfectly possible to get the plastic out of your life. You can get paper bags and so on. So yeah, they're all endocrine disruptors and they're all carcinogenic as well. And anything that's carcinogenic is also going to be teratogenic. It's going to damage the fetus in the womb because the mechanism is damaging DNA. And if you damage our genetic code, you're an adult, that's a risk of cancer. But if you're a baby in the womb, it's going to do serious damage. So the more we can, and I will talk later about how, but the more we can live our lives without contact with pesticides, plastics, heavy metals, and lots of petrochemicals, which is possible, and good nutrition is part of that, but it's not the whole story, the safer our babies will be and the safer we'll be.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Follow up really on this follow up to you again, Jenny, sorry. So we understand that fertility rates are actually falling across the Western world. So how have you seen this actually manifest clinically?
Well, I've seen it manifest in clinic in 25 years of doing preconception care, which is the ideal. That is, a couple want to conceive and they come before they've even started trying, and you make sure their nutrition is tip-top and their toxins are gone if they had any on board. But in practice, you see people who have suffered from infertility or repeated miscarriages, or who've had a child with a really serious birth defect and want to try for a healthy child, and they've got no chromosomal explanation. So you're asking me why. Falling fertility is massive. It's been falling since the 1970s. Highest sperm counts are among organic farmers. Lowest are among conventional industrial monocrop agri-chemical practitioners. So we know that pesticides is a part of it. But infertility, like any serious condition, is always multifactorial. So pesticides, air pollution, water pollution, we can talk later about what's coming out of your tap, and the pollution of the soil with pesticides, which gets into the plant, and also nutritional deficiencies, which are partly from the same cause, because the same chemical fields that are drenched in pesticides are also drenched in synthetic fertilizers. The good minerals are not left in the soil. And if it's not in the soil, it's not in the crops, it's not on your plate. And if it's animal that you're eating and the animal's eaten these weakened crops, then even if you're not eating any ultra-processed food, even if you're eating what would appear to be a healthy diet, if it was grown in soil that's depleted, you'll be nutritionally depleted. And if it's grown in soil that's polluted, your body will be polluted. So all of these factors, the nutrition and the pollution, is part of the reasons that sperm count, and we can't look at it directly, but egg count, if you like, female and male infertility is falling. But I think male fertility is falling even more. We can talk later about why that might be.
Okay, thank you very much. So Francesca, a question for you. Can you tell us about some of the problems that some of your fertility clients are coming to you with?
Yeah, I see a lot of everything. I mean, unfortunately, I feel like sometimes I see people who are really struggling with fertility for a long time. We hope to see people who are thinking, I'd like to try in 3 to 6 months. But the reality is you kind of often get the people who come going, I'm really struggling. But the issues that I see are people with multiple miscarriage, infertility, unable to sort of implant the embryo if they're going through IVF. But what that's actually saying is they're having issues with their toxins, they're having issues with their methylation, which is a process in the body that happens in every cell. And, a lot is very linked to miscarriage as well. They're having problems with their nutrient levels, they're having problems with their vaginal microbiome or their gut microbiome, their stress, their cortisol. I kind of think when people come to me with like unexplained infertility, it's not unexplained, it's under-investigated. There's always a reason. I've seen that countless times, people saying I've been to 6 doctors and they just say it's unexplained infertility. And then we research and we go, it's not so unexplained anymore. We just hadn't tested the right things. So really I see a bit of everything, because fertility is a reflection of your entire health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, your physical health. So my job keeps me really on my toes. I see everything. It's not just sort of one thing causing fertility issues. It's so holistic. Yeah.
Interesting. So again, what would you say going on about nutrition and imbalances? What sort of depletions would you say that conventional assessments are missing, and how can you then identify them?
Yeah, a lot. When you go to, and I love GPs and I work closely with GPs, but often if you go to your GP or even to the IVF clinic, you get a very basic set of bloods. They look, for example, at your thyroid, at your TSH, which is actually a pituitary hormone, and not at your T4 and your thyroid antibodies, and you're not actually getting a full picture. So you're getting these kind of little pictures where they go, it looks okay. Or for example, even when you test hormones with blood testing, your hormones actually pulse throughout the day. So when you get a blood test, you're getting this one moment in time where it goes, oh, look, your testosterone looks normal, looks fine. But then you test 20 minutes later and it's a different story. So, and there's often a lot of testing on the wrong days. The amount of times I've seen you ovulate on day 14, so test your progesterone 5 days after that. Only 20% of the population ovulate on day 14. So, there's this real standard sort of care that women get, unfortunately, when we actually need such hyper-personalized care. Not only are the nutrients not tested, but they are also not looked at in optimal ranges. They've given this sort of range. And if you think about it, blood testing, it's typically done on people who aren't necessarily maybe well, and then you're getting these ranges that are just sort of real guessing ranges. So you look, for example, at TSH. As I said, you could have that being at 1, or you could have that at being at 4, and it's considered in range. At fertility, I like to see that at like 1. Maybe 2, depending on the person. So I think it's under investigation, and not just accepting everything looks normal, because I promise you there's something there. We just need to dig a little bit deeper.
Thanks so much. Jenny, as you were saying earlier, one of the things that probably has changed so much over the years in our diets is ultra-processed foods. We're seeing more and more of them. How are you finding that they kind of negatively affect fertility in both women and in men?
Well, yeah, so we have seen an increase in the number of ultra-processed foods. So about 1975, this whole process of introducing additives to food to create profit, essentially, to sort of marry the expansion of the sort of retail landscape. If you think we all moved to shopping in big stores, and we needed to have things that lasted long enough to get from wherever they'd been made to wherever they were going to be stored to wherever they were going to be sold. And in order to do that, we have to add things to the food. And then, for example, in 1961, we brought in this Chorleywood bread making process, which by and large is the process by which most of the bread that you'll find in a supermarket is made today. It's a really quick process. It's a process that leads to a huge amount of additives added to bread, most commonly sort of in excess of at least 10. Now, if most of you have made your own bread, you'll know that bread does not take 10 ingredients to make. And, you know, wraps, well, I won't even start on wraps, but wraps, which I think a lot of people eat these days with in excess of 13 ingredients. So bakery goods, because of this Chorleywood making process, because of the way we shop, bakery are probably one of the worst segments, if you like. But what that leads to is multiple effects on our health, on our short-term and our long-term health, and on our fertility, both male and female. But it can lead to elevated insulin, for example. It can affect our gut health. It can lead to nutrient deficiencies. It can lead to obesity. We know that there's a correlation, and it is a correlation between those that eat the highest number of ultra-processed foods and obesity. So if you look at all of those in the context of the discussion we're having now, you know, obesity, elevated insulin, nutrient deficiencies, none of those things are good news for fertility. So ultra-processed foods have their role to play within the larger environmental framework that we're talking about. So they're just, it seems like it's all bad news up here at the moment, doesn't it? Hopefully there'll be some good news soon.
There will be some good news hopefully at the end, but
Good news because it's in our control.
It's in our control.
Yeah.
Once we know.
Yeah, exactly.
And knowledge is power, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, so we're going to dig a little deeper into toxins and testing. So I'm going to actually I'll go to you first, Francesca. So what types of testing, sort of functional and integrative, have I said that correctly? Yeah. Are you finding most helpful that are getting to the root of fertility challenges?
Yeah, so there's no one size fits all. It sort of depends on the person that presents and their health history and things like that. But doing a functional hormone test, like a urine test, to understand not just your levels of your hormones, but the pathways, how they move, how they detoxify, can be really game changing. For example, you might sort of have your estrogen really moving down a pathway that we call the 16-OH or 4-OH, which moves your estrogen down a pathway to detox, but it actually in the process creates a lot of oxidative stress and inflammation. So you are ending up with this sort of extra inflammation that's causing like insulin resistance, it's causing delayed ovulation, maybe missing periods, maybe it's causing joint pain or PMS, that kind of thing. So it's about understanding, again, that bigger picture, not just the hormone levels, but what they're actually doing. One of the tests I love to run on my clients is the vaginal microbiome test. I know there was a study done in 2019 that looked at a cohort of people going through IVF in an IVF clinic, and they took those people and they did a vaginal microbiome in all of them, and they found with 94% accuracy they could predict who was going to have a failed implantation of that embryo based on their vaginal microbiome. So the IVF clinics know this information. We know that a lactobacillus species dominant vaginal microbiome is really, really conducive to having a healthy implantation and therefore a healthier pregnancy. But then nothing's actually being done about it. So it's a really, really wonderful test. Looking at methylation, as I mentioned, is really, really powerful. Methylation, as I said, is a process that happens in every cell in the body. But if you're a real undermethylator, which can be really impacted by toxins, if you have a real heavy toxic load and your body's had to really work on trying to clear that out, you can be quite a low methylator, and that's linked to a real increased risk of multiple miscarriage and fertility issues as well as like low sperm count if you're a male. So there's multiple, and I could go on and on about all the different tests, but really it depends on the person presenting. But there's so much more information out there. The Future Woman test actually looks at how well you detoxify, which gives you a sense of whether you're actually able to take these, not just hormones, but toxins, and actually clear them from your body as well. So, we're talking all about like all the things that really can impact, but this, like we said, there's so much in our control, and there's so much we can actually do to really support the detoxification process as well. Yeah, that's just a snippet of them anyway.
Great, thanks. So Jenny, G, sorry, could you explain the concept of body burden and how cumulative exposure to toxins can influence fertility over time?
Yeah, I will. I just want to add a postscript to what you were saying, Francesca, which is in trying to figure out whether toxins, environmental toxins, are playing a role in someone's fertility issues, testing is not the only way to find out. I mean, we do tests. We test whether there's pesticides and plastics and heavy metals inside someone's body or not. But we also take a very detailed environmental history. Where did you grow up? Where did your mother grow up? What was she in contact with when she was pregnant with you? What was she in contact with before she conceived you? Was she dyeing her hair? Was your dad working on a building site? Do they have MDF furniture in their bedroom? Do they spray air freshener? Do the parents spray air freshener around the place? Are they sleeping on a toxic mattress? There's hundreds of things in the home, synthetic cosmetics, synthetic clothing, perfume, deodorant, all these things, so you ask. And actually, 90% of my information about what toxins someone's been exposed to are from asking, doing an environmental history as well as a medical history. And the testing is just the icing on the cake. In terms of your question about total body burden, I think what we have to remember is that all these environmental toxins we're talking about, because they're mostly derived from petrochemicals, from crude oil, and they're as toxic as diesel and petrol fumes, they are lipophilic. And what that means is they dissolve in fat. They're not water soluble, so you can't just pee them out. Because they dissolve in fat, A, they can be stored in the body, and B, they can go through the skin. So, if your moisturizer is petrochemical, which it is if it's not a natural herbal one, it'll go straight through your skin as if you had swallowed it. And once inside the body, our cell membranes are made of fat as well. So all these chemicals go through the cell membranes into every cell in the body, and they end up concentrated in the organ of the body which has the highest fat content, and that is the brain, whether it's your brain or the brain of the fetus. So the concept of total body burden, or total load, as we call it, is the accumulation of these toxins in tiny amounts, but every day, the drip, drip, as opposed to acute poisoning, like you broke a thermometer in your mouth, you've got acute mercury poisoning. This is slow, imperceptible drip, drip poisoning that we're all subject to unless we know where it's coming from and know how to avoid it. And it builds up. And so our job as practitioners, we're never going to be able to get 100% out of the toxins out of people in the toxic world. It's to get 90% out. And the more you reduce the toxic load, the better it is. And plastics being the ones that's hardest to get out will probably be what's left. Although we can remove 2 of the types of chemicals that go along with plastics and are put in to make them softer. So that's phthalates, P-H-T-H-A-L-A-T-E. We can't pronounce them, but we can detox them. Okay, phthalates. And also BPA. I just want to issue a warning here. So we all know that bisphenol A, or BPA, is bad, incredibly bad for the fetus, associated with neuroblastoma, which is a brain tumor in tiny babies. And you'll see plastic-looking products around that say BPA-free. Be careful, because that means it's free of bisphenol A, but there's bisphenol B to Z as well. So just go plastic-free, really. I've gone a bit off topic, haven't I?
No, that was fine. It's in depth, but it's good, very good. Jenny T, so what sort of specific, I would say, food additives and ingredients stand out to you as being especially harmful to reproductive health?
So the interesting thing about ultra-processed foods and the evidence that we have as you can well imagine, that has to be sort of observational studies rather than be able to sort of prove a causation. So we know that there's a correlation between the amount of ultra processed foods we eat and harmful effects, including those that I've already outlined. Remind me what the question was.
So which specific food and ingredients would you say are particularly harmful to reproductive health?
Okay, so probably the best available evidence that we have at the moment is on emulsifiers, and particularly CMC and polysorbate 80, so carboxymethyl cellulose and polysorbate 80. And those are two of the worst offenders when it comes to the emulsifiers that we find in all sorts of products, including skin-based products, as well as things like ice cream and sort of snack foods. But we will, I mean, even actually, I found it in my coconut milk from a very well-known supermarket here in the UK. So these things are finding their way into our everyday lives. But emulsifiers is probably where we're doing the most amount of research. And actually, there was a really good food programme on BBC Radio 4, which covered that specifically around the subject of emulsifiers. So it's worth listening to if you get the opportunity, and around the research that's being done there. But specific ingredients that have a, that we can literally say there's a correlation, the causation, the relationship between a specific ultra-processed ingredient and infertility. No, we can't say that at the moment, but we do see the patterns of elevated insulin. We see the patterns of nutrient deficiencies. We see particularly where there's sort of a correlation between the consumption of high volumes of ultra-processed foods, metabolic issues, and then PCOS, for example, polycystic ovarian syndrome. So, there are definitely studies that are going to help us understand this relationship better, but I don't think we're ever going to get to the bottom of very specific ultra-processed ingredients. But what I would say, the evidence to date suggests that emulsifiers are a no-go. There is a caveat to that. Lecithin can be quite useful for some people, but I wouldn't use soy lecithin because of hexane, which is a chemical which is used in the extraction of soy, and the fact that soy is in everything and is one of the few crops that we have in our very monoculture, grain culture that we have. And so I would say if you are going to eat lecithin, sunflower lecithin would be preferred. Anyway.
Right. And I'm going to carry on with a question that's related to that. So if are we seeing that if is it reversible? If we change our diet, can it make a difference?
Yeah, well, I mean, you only have to look at the other nations where ultra-processed foods are not being consumed anywhere near the level that they are here. And looking, I mean, it sounds it sounds quite morbid to say this, but if we look at the sort of prime cause of death in different countries, I mean, actually, dementia is one of the prime causes of death here, and the 8th leading cause in Italy, where 18% of the diet is ultra-processed, where we compare that to 60% of our diet here. So we only have to look at the effect that ultra-processed foods can have on that lovely fatty organ, the brain, to understand that we should be concerned about what's in our food.
Yeah, that's not a scary fact, but
yeah.
I'm hoping we'll be cheerful a bit later on. Anyway, so again, I'm going to go into things like, well, you were talking about earlier on, I think both Francesca and Jenny G were talking about unexplained infertility and what sort of hidden factors there are. So Jenny G, in cases of unexplained infertility, how often do you suspect that it is things like environmental toxins that are playing a silent role? And what signs would you say point you into that direction?
Well, I would agree with Francesca completely. It's not unexplained, it's under-investigated. Explained would be something like, there's an anatomical problem, right? The fallopian tubes are blocked, or there is no mechanical way for the sperm to reach the egg in the tube, something like that. Those sorts of things are justifications for IVF. Very little else is. But if the menstrual cycle is more or less okay and the hormones are okay as tested crudely by the NHS, God bless, then they call it unexplained. But as we were saying earlier, they don't test properly for nutrients at all. I mean, the only mineral they test for is iron, and even that, they don't test iron, they test hemoglobin. Your hemoglobin in your red blood cells is the most important use of iron in the body, and the body's very sensible. It won't let that drop until you've got almost no iron left. So by the time your hemoglobin shows up low, you're desperately anemic. So I would test always iron, the iodine, which is crucial for conception, selenium, zinc, magnesium, all the B vitamins, including B12, B6 and folate, which are crucial for the methylation issues that Francesca rightly mentioned, and vitamin E and vitamin D, omega-3 and omega-6, essential fatty acids. Sadly, the NHS doesn't test for any of those. I almost always find loads of deficiencies after those testings, therefore no longer unexplained. And I'm talking about testing men as well as women. This is really crucial. And if you've got a lesbian couple, you want to encourage the donor to come in, or a straight single woman. So the man has to be tested. So those things are always low. I suspect environmental toxins in anyone who lives in, on planet Earth. So unless you've grown up on a remote organic farm eating your own produce, you're going to have toxins in there. But what are the red flags that highlight toxicity, apart from environmental history and actual testing, are when someone is eating a really healthy diet and their nutrient levels seem okay-ish, and when they've been doing everything right, and yet things aren't working. You will always find environmental toxins in that situation. But as I say, they can be detoxed. And as Francesca mentioned, the genetics is really important here. Our liver makes enzymes whose job is to detoxify poisons and get them out of our system. But they were not evolved for a world of petrochemicals. They evolved for things like snake venom and stinging nettle poison, and also to detox our own hormones. I mean, a woman's liver spends like a third of its capacity just detoxing our own estrogen, right? So if you've got a whole load of other things to detox, it's going to be really difficult. So some people have naturally better detox systems than others. And those genetic differences, including the methylation, many other differences, would have made no difference to their health or fertility before the Industrial Revolution. But now we're surrounded by synthetic chemicals that our detox systems were not evolved to deal with. That's when those genetic differences can make the difference between life and death, between conceiving and not conceiving. And that's why I think genetic tests are important as well. So living healthily and detoxing is jolly good for everyone, but absolutely vital for people who are more genetically vulnerable. And it's nowadays really easy to find out.
Okay, thanks so much for that. And Francesca, going on to you in terms of the people coming to you and they've said, oh, we've had an unexplained infertility diagnosis. How do you then approach that from a sort of like a root cause perspective?
Yeah, again, it's the individual, and it's really, as Jenny said as well, taking a really thorough case take of that person and understanding their childhood and their, illnesses they had, and were they vaccinated, were they not, all these kinds of things. So then in getting their test results and looking at them as this sort of real individual, and then making a decision from there as to what you need to address. But everyone is so different. When we do the Future Women tests on our fertility clients, we really see so often that, as I said before, on a top level, everything looks so normal, and then you dig deeper and you really see the issues with detoxification, the underlying oxidative stress. And we have a marker on our test that's called 8-OHDG, which is a marker for oxidative stress. And we see that really high in those with exposure to toxins, and it can really greatly impact follicle development and embryo development. So we're seeing like these things that you wouldn't necessarily immediately associate with being a fertility issue, because they have great estrogen, great progesterone, lovely luteal phase, nice testosterone, looks lovely. But then you dig deeper and you just see these sort of underlying oxidative stress that's really impacting the quality, both again for men as well. We're not talking about men, but they're 50% of the journey. So to say where I would start with a person, it's so individual. It really, really depends. But getting to know them on a nutrient level, on a health history level, and also on like where they are spiritually and mentally. Do they believe they're going to have a baby? Do they, there's a whole aspect of self-belief and narrative there as well that really impacts your health and the way that you like, I don't know if anyone's read Bruce Lipton's work, The Biology of Belief. He was sort of the pioneer of what you think you almost become, you know, what you think. It changes the cellular functioning, and that instructs your cells to work in a different way. And that's such an important part of believing you can be well and have a healthy pregnancy as well.
Can someone write that down for me, please?
Yes.
No, that's fascinating. So Jenny T, if you take a diet that's high in ultra processed foods and compare it to someone who has a whole foods diet, how will they affect your reproductive health?
Yeah, hugely. So we talked about the negatives about ultra processed food, and I don't know if I've actually clarified even what I mean by ultra processed food, so maybe I should, so that we can compare it to a whole food diet. But ultra processed foods are those that have a significant number of additives that you wouldn't find in your everyday kitchen. That's an oversimplified way of saying it, but it's a way that we can all grab hold of. So, we wouldn't find emulsifiers in our kitchen other than egg yolk. We wouldn't find colorings unless you were going to do some baking and add it to. You wouldn't find the number of preservatives that you find in these foods, and you certainly wouldn't find some of the sweeteners that you find, and you wouldn't find them all together. You wouldn't certainly put them in one dish in your kitchen if you were making something from scratch. So these are all what we call ultra processed foods, but by comparison, if we compare that to a whole food diet, one which it sounds so easy to say, and we're so cliched about it. I'm sure you guys both have heard this. I eat a balanced diet. If we interviewed every single one of you in this room, your version of balanced diet would be so different. Your individual perspective on what a balanced diet is. But really, when we talk about eating from scratch and we're eating a whole food diet, we talk about whole grains. And we talk about varying those grains. I've already sort of lent into this a little bit, but we do rely so heavily on wheat, soy, and corn. How many of you eat grains that are not wheat, soy, and corn on a regular basis? And how many of you are eating those three things without knowing you're eating it? I'm not talking about eating it in the form of bread. I'm talking about eating it in the form of products that you've bought from the supermarket that are ready to consume because they've been used or sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, or they've got soy added to them as soy lecithin, or they've got corn or soy or wheat, to bulk them out, modified starches, modified maize starch. So we are consuming a very few number of foods, of grains, and actually the same with vegetables. I mean, I commented when I tasted the turnip earlier on. I joked, didn't I, that the last time I probably even talked about turnip was when I was being read a story as a kid about pulling a giant one out of the ground, because we don't see turnips in the supermarket anymore. We rarely see them in the greengrocers. We've become so limited. You talk to people about 5 a day. Let's even say that, because we know that's a common terminology, 5 a day. I bet you most people, if we went out there and said, what do you eat 5 a day? Broccoli, carrots, peas, potatoes. Can you really say that's 5? We've got to broaden the scope of what we eat to get the greatest variety of nutrients. So a whole food diet is one that is nourishing. An ultra processed diet is one that actually takes away. It removes. It reduces us and our abilities to function as human beings should. So a whole food diet is one that's going to support fertility, but it's because we are not only eating whole foods, whole grains. We're not only eating vegetables and fruit. We're not eating fish and poultry and meat, but we're eating a variety of all of those things. And we're getting it from, hopefully, the best we can afford in terms of the source that we choose to buy those things from. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Jenny G, what are some of the main sources of toxin exposure that you see impacting women in their reproductive years? And is there any way to avoid some of that toxic load?
Okay, ask me again in half a minute when I've just followed on from something you were saying. I would count all those ingredients in ultra-processed food as toxins. They are part of the cocktail. And as you say, it's not just that they're full of junk that's toxic, it's that they're completely missing in the essential nutrients. And just to cheer you up even further, I should warn you that a lot of cheap supplements are full of exactly those same additives, the colorings. In chapter 6 of my first book called Nourish and Flourish, I have a little rant about cheap and nasty commercially produced mineral and vitamin supplements, which if you read the ingredients list, you need a magnifying glass. If you read the ingredients list, not just the list of nutrients, but the total ingredients list, you'll find vitamins and minerals in tiny quantities right at the end of the list. And first you'll have calcium carbonate and bulking agent and cellulose this and methyl cellulose that. and sugar and saccharin and colorings. And the ones for kids are particularly noxious. And even with the prenatal ones, you have to be careful. Read the ingredients list because they can be full of the same stuff. And you asked me a question. I'm sorry, it's gone.
It was about
It's not just me.
Don't worry. Toxin exposure. What are the main sources of toxin exposure, particularly in women in their reproductive years?
Well,
and how can we avoid?
I think they're
them?
the same as for all of us, right? First and foremost, food. And not only do we have to eat real food, you know, I mean, if you pick an apple off a tree, it doesn't have an ingredients list, right? If you catch a fish from the sea, it doesn't have any food without an ingredients list. Real food, but it has to be organic. I should just be clear that organically grown food is not some kind of weird new hippie food. It's food, just like our great-grandparents ate, and just like we ate going back 1,000 generations. It's simply food to which synthetic pesticides, neurotoxins have not been added. It's vegetables that haven't been sprayed with glyphosate, which is very strongly implicated in cancer and dementia. It's animals that haven't been fed antibiotics. Because if your animals are battery farmed, there's so much cruelty in that. They're living so artificially, so unable to express their natural behavior that of course they're stressed. So their immune systems take a hit, so they would get continual infections if they weren't dosed on low-dose antibiotics. So if you're eating animal produce that's not organically produced, you're eating the antibiotics that those animals ate. So that's soil food. Another source is what's coming out of your tap. And I would strongly, strongly recommend getting a plumbed-in whole-house water filter because there's chlorine, which will leach the iodine out, and iodine is crucial for the health of the breast and the prostate, and is crucial for the health of the thyroid gland, of course. And Francesca was right that conventional tests of thyroid health tell you absolutely nothing, and they fail to test for iodine, deficiency of which is the main cause of low thyroid. But it's not just because we're not eating enough. Iodine is in fish and it's in seaweed. So if you're vegetarian, please eat seaweed, but not from the area around Fukushima. Okay, so it's not just that we're not eating enough iodine, it's that we're consuming toxic halogens, chemicals similar to iodine, but whereas iodine is essential, these others are lethal. So that's chlorine coming out of your tap, bromine, which is in flame retardants. Flame retardants, polybrominated biphenyls, have bromine in them, and they're in all synthetic soft furnishings. So your synthetic sofas, mattresses, carpets, cushions, and so on. And again, you can get safe alternatives. And there's fluoride in the tap water in the West Midlands, certain parts of the North East and North West, and in the Republic of Ireland. Virtually nowhere in Europe, but every state in America. So you just compare levels of sanity in the two continents. It tells you, which we know definitely, fluoride is damaging for the brain, lethal for the fetus, absolutely lethal. It damages the pineal gland as well as the thyroid, the ovary, the kidneys, the bone, and the brain. But get a water filter and then you're not drinking fluoride. So check the food, check the water, check the air that you're breathing, you know, because the outside air is very polluted. But the thing you can do most about is the air inside your home. As I say, if you stop with the air fresheners, why does your house need air fresheners? Open the windows, empty the bins. If you still want a nice smell, burn some lavender oil or jasmine or lemongrass or geranium, one of these wonderful natural essential oils, which, by the way, is what perfume was before the Industrial Revolution. It was just flower essences. And you really aren't going to want to hear this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Moderate your use of a mobile phone, because electromagnetic radiation is coming out of your mobile phone and your Wi-Fi router and the cell phone towers or mobile phone masts. If you have a mobile phone on in your pocket, you're irradiating your ovaries or your testes and your prostate if you're a man. If you have it in your breast pocket, you're irradiating your heart and your breast. The most frightening thing I've seen is slings, baby slings, and I'm absolutely 100% for carrying your baby in a sling. Babies in slings don't cry. Babies in pushchairs cry. And some of the slings are now made with a little handy pocket at the back. Just put a pack of tissues in there. Do not put a mobile phone in there because it's 1 inch from your baby's heart. And there are, I'm afraid, thousands of published studies showing that electromagnetic radiation is linked with cancer and it's linked with brain tumours. But the good news is you can still use your mobile phone. Just don't have it touching your head. Have it at a distance. Don't put it in your pocket, put it in a bag. And if you're trying for a baby, do not put your laptop on your lap, and don't have a Wi-Fi router on in the bedroom at night. Those are all the things you can do to make yourself safer and increase the chance of healthy conception and pregnancy.
Thank you. Amazing news. Well, not news, you knew it, but news to me, definitely. Francesca, what sort of, do you see toxins impacting women who've got conditions like PCOS and endometritis?
Yeah, all the time. Polycystic ovarian syndrome and endometriosis. I mean, there's so many studies supporting this now. We've known this for a long time as well. There was some research done in 2019 that looked at those with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and they were found to have 60% higher levels of BPA in their follicular fluid and in their bloodstream as well. So, 60% higher is really scary, actually. And same with phthalates as well. That's been found as well. The University of Cambridge did a study that found that there were much higher levels of phthalates in those with polycystic ovarian syndrome, especially if they lived in urban areas as well. And same with endometriosis. Endometriosis is such a complex one, and the science world is always trying to figure out what's going on with it, because, we don't fully completely understand it yet. We know there's, a triggering virus or bacteria, a lot of theories that it's it's already there in the womb. There's so many theories about it, but we absolutely know that toxins have a role to play in endometriosis. Again, so many studies that cite this as well, especially BPA and phthalates and things like that as well.
And mercury.
And mercury, exactly. And we know this, yet a lot of the time something's not done about it. So again, I think information, it can be really scary, and we don't, kind of almost don't want to hear it when we've got busy lives and we're overwhelmed. But this is power. This knowledge is real power for us to be able to really do something about. So yeah, they're very, very linked to toxins, as well as many other factors as well. But toxins really can impact your insulin resistance. So it can make you really insulin resistant, which can throw off your hunger cues. It can cause weight gain. It can cause acne, head hair loss, things like that as well, and make people just generally really not feel like themselves. So yeah, it's linked to so many things.
Okay, we're going to lead on to some actual practical action now, and some empowerment to, hopefully end on a more sort of cheerier level on what we can do to go forward. So, Jenny T, what would you say people can actually do to reduce their intake of ultra-processed foods? And what are your favourite tips for someone just starting on a shift to sort of a more healthier and fertility-friendly diet?
Okay, so I think probably the first thing, and I've heard that I'm stealing this from someone else, but to go shopping with your strongest specs on, so if you are in a supermarket, and to Jenny's point, ideally we'd all eat food without labels. There would be a far better world if we could, and if we could buy things without labels, but it's difficult, right? So most of us will shop in supermarkets, many of us will shop online. So shopping with your strongest specs, sadly, is a case of reading the labels, looking for ingredients that you don't recognize. I think one of my favorite authors is Michael Pollan, Pollan. He's got a really great book. If you've got partners or family members that are struggling to get on board with this approach to real food or to reducing toxins, he makes so much sense. But it's the sort of book, dare I say it, you could have in your downstairs loo, and partners could read and really engage with and get on board, because he will talk about, don't eat anything your great grandmother wouldn't recognize. And I think that's so true. If we could just go back to eating real food that is recognizable to us humans. So that's what I would say. For probably the first thing is to go shopping with your strongest specs on. The second thing is start to engage with making things from scratch, not every day, not every night, not all the time. But, this week I've been on a tasting panel for Health Food Awards, and we were sent some things to taste. Obviously, I'm not going to give the brand away, but there's a brand that I know a lot of my clients have used that's one of these delivery food brands. And I've often been curious, as someone that writes recipe books, I've very little need for someone to deliver meals already made to me. But these are supposed to be healthy meals that you heat up and then you consume. So I was quite excited, thinking, well, this is what my clients eat. Well, I must taste them and see what they're like. And they were so dry. And I just thought, why would anybody choose this over making your own from scratch? So, but I understand time is difficult. I know we've got problems with, I suppose it is with prioritization. I'm not very good at it myself, but prioritizing cooking, prioritizing preparing meals from scratch, and actually showing the next generation that that's part and parcel of life, that we do need to prioritize. We need to make some time to make food, to make meals from scratch and enjoy them together. But I would say just start by preparing a few meals, even if it's 2 a week yourself, 3 a week, maybe extend it to 4 a week yourself. Batch cook so that you've got things that are ready to go in the freezer. There's some great ways of doing that, some great people that you can follow online to do that. But again, store it correctly, store it in the right kind of packaging so that you're not just adding more plastic to the balance. And snacks, we didn't used to snack, and there's plenty of cultures in the world that do not snack. We should be able to go between meals without snacking. We don't have to stop and grab something on the go. And if you did, and you were stopping at any of the fast food places around here, or even some of the little stop and go supermarkets, the sort of snacks that are available by and large are not very healthy snacks, and they're in plastic packaging because that's cheap and it's light. So if we do want to snack, then make things to take with you. Like I made these lovely roasted peas the other day. They're literally frozen peas that I've just put olive oil, salt, pepper and sweet smoked paprika on. You could just imagine the smokiness, the saltiness, the natural sweetness from the peas. 4 ingredients, that's it. And you can take those with you in a little paper bag and off we go. So yes, I would look at labels. I would try and make a little bit more yourself, batch cook a little bit more, and don't stress over it, but do become more aware, because if you live in this country, you need to be more aware than other countries. There we go. Hopefully that's helpful.
I saw a little clip, a Jamie Oliver clip the other day in a school asking kids what the vegetables were, and they couldn't name them.
Yeah.
And it was horrifying. It's really scary. These kids don't even know what their vegetables are called.
I know, yes, unless they've seen, tomatoes was one of them. I mean, obviously, we should know what a tomato looks like, but they may not have seen it in any other way than ketchup. So yeah, that's the sad reality of it.
Great, thanks so much, Jenny. Francesca, maybe you can share a success story where a natural approach has helped someone conceive, particularly if they've struggled with conventional options in the past.
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's loads of stories. One of them I would say that I can think of that recently was that somebody was told unexplained infertility. Basically, they had normal menstrual cycles, had all the blood tests, told, look, nothing, keep trying. Off you go. She did a Future Woman test with us, and she actually had polycystic ovarian syndrome, but it hadn't been picked up because she had normal levels of testosterone. So they thought, okay, look, that looks fine. But we saw her other androgens were actually raised, and it was giving a real polycystic ovarian syndrome picture. She also had very, very low cortisol. So that means she had been stressed for a really long time, or something had been stressing her. So her cortisol had gone high, but it actually started to plummet and had gone really low. And what that does is it means your immune system doesn't function very well. So she didn't have that lovely anti-inflammatory impact that cortisol can give you. Cortisol is a beautiful anti-inflammatory. It's got, it's really beneficial, but she didn't have that. So her immune system was really struggling. And she also had all of her estrogen that went down the 16-OH pathway, which is again linked to oxidative stress. So she just had this inflammation, oxidative stress. And also when you have high androgens, it impacts your egg quality and your follicle quality. They can't develop properly. You get lots of immature follicles rather than this beautiful developing follicle. So once we realized all of that, like I said before, nothing was unexplained anymore. We spent 3 months correcting all these things, and she got pregnant and had a healthy baby. So, there's lots of stories like that. When you get the right thing for the right person, it's actually really simple. Yeah.
Great, that's really good to hear. Thank you so much. And Jenny G, if someone wants to start detoxifying their home and feels a bit overwhelmed, where would you say are the places to begin? Maybe where can you make the most of it?
Okay, I'll go briefly through each room in the house, but I just want to amplify something you said. Our cave people ancestors, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, ate about 1,000 different plants every year. Right, so I'll call this vitamin V for variety. So the first thing you can do is try a brand new vegetable you've never eaten before every single week, and keep rotating them and increase the variety. That's one thing. You don't need to shop at a supermarket. There are loads of organic vegetable delivery services now. My favourite is Riverford. Riverford are based in Devon. It's a farm, and they will deliver organic veg and organic dairy, eggs, meat, fruit, more or less everything except fish, to your door, right? So you just go online, you don't have to have a standard box, you choose whatever you want, and everything is Soil Association approved organic, and that's going to change your health overnight. In your house, I would say the single most important thing is what you're sleeping on, because we spend 8 hours a night in bed. If the mattress is synthetic and full of chemical toxins, and if it's less than 2 years old, it's still outgassing. That's going into your lungs at night, and it's also going in through your skin at night. Don't worry if it's older than 2 years old. But if you're buying a new mattress, and if you're buying a mattress for a baby, although they don't need one, they can share your bed for quite a while, make sure it's organic. It's much easier than it used to be to buy an organic mattress. So that's number one. Number two, as I say, as well as eating organic, get a whole house plumbed in water filter. And the reason I say whole house plumbed in is, sure, you don't want to be drinking the chlorine and the fluoride. You also don't want to be bathing in it, because then you're inhaling it from the bath or shower and it's going in through your skin. And what else is in your water apart from chlorine and possibly fluoride is everything the water companies fail to take out. So the pesticide residues, the synthetic fertilizer residues, and the residues of the drugs that everyone else is taking. Now, your neighbour could be on anti-inflammatories, antihypertensives, antidepressants, they could be on chemo, antibiotics, anti-epileptics, anything. We all pee, and they could be on the pill, and they could be on HRT. So we're all peeing out into the water table, and those hormones and those drugs are there. The water companies have no system for taking them out. Their job is just to take out toxic bacteria like cholera or something. Actually, their job is to make profits for their shareholders. That's their legal priority. So all that stuff and the drugs peed out by all the non-organic farm animals, right? And the drugs peed out by everybody's pets. Because, you know, dogs are dying much earlier than they used to because they're getting cancer younger, just like we are. So for all those reasons, filter your water. So it's a huge thing. So filter your water, get the plastic out of your house. When you're buying new soft furnishings, get natural materials. But, you know, keep the windows open. Keep the windows open. And also you want to avoid mold. It's not technically synthetic. But if you have the windows shut because you're being terribly conscientious and you want to be insulated and save energy, there's no way the mold spores can get out. You need a certain amount of warmth and air circulation. Otherwise, you've got mold in your bathroom. That's just for starters. There's more details in the books.
They're really good, very practical tips from all of you. I have got probably one other question, but I wanted to open it up to you in the audience. There's already a question over there, and there's a question in the front. So, can I?
Roving mic.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we have a roving mic, or shall I just? Oh, there we go. Oh. No, that's not a roving mic, is it?
Hello? Oh, there we go. Hi. One of the questions I wanted to ask was actually about the water filter that you spoke about. So obviously, being in London, a lot of us rent, we don't own a property. So in those scenarios, is there a brand of filter that you would recommend that would make it easier in terms of drinking as well as in the bath?
You can't plumbed in. You can't get plumbed in. But even the cheapest countertop water filter is much, much, much better than nothing. And that's what I advise students and young people who are renting to do. The problem is the jugs tend to be plastic. So you either want to put it in the fridge where there's much less transmission of the plasticizer chemicals to the water, or actually change it over to a glass jug. And there are, you know, things you can get to hang on the taps, on the shower and on the bath taps, which help a little bit to take the chlorine out.
I love the Berkey water filters too. I don't know if you use the Berkey, yeah? The big silver ones, they're really nice. And you can get the fluoride attachments as well.
Hard to bathe in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The old-fashioned, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I just wanted to add about the Berkey filter. I love it as well. I use the travel one, which is much smaller, but I tried to get a replacement filter and found out that they're out of business now. But there's another brand called Borax.
Oh, no, they're in the US, they're out of business. Well, they've got a lawsuit on them, but you can get them in the UK. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's good to know. All right, thanks.
Sorry, whilst we're on the water filter question, excuse my ignorance with the brand that you just said. Is that for a plumbed-in household
Oh, the
filter?
Berkey one is like a countertop
Okay,
one, yeah, that you pour your tap water into and then it filters.
I understand. Sure. So then my question would be, for a plumbed-in water filter, do you have a brand recommendation? Or?
Yeah, I do. And I'm asked this so much every single time. I know it's on page 275 of the first book. And there's a lot about it in chapter 3, the water chapter in the second book. Basically, it's hazardous to recommend a particular brand. But what I would say is these are the 2 criteria for choosing your brand. Firstly, have they been making water filters for decades, or have they just jumped on the bandwagon now? And secondly, when you write to them and you say, please can you explain precisely which toxins your water filter removes and how it does it, with references, you want a long detailed email in response. If they can't do that, you can't trust them.
There were some other questions. Oh, on one over there.
Firstly, thank you all for your insights. It was really interesting. I have a question around how do those of us who have a lot of interface with the NHS or with allopathic medicine try to get our medics to be open to us having an integrative approach to our health?
It's really tricky, and I think it's about really finding an integrative practitioner, doctor, naturopath that will kind of take on the role for you of sort of being the interface. My role is so often to be the interface between my client and the IVF clinic or their GP, and I can write a letter. It's really hard because the NHS actually has a lot of limits as well. They're not allowed to actually test. Like for thyroid, for example, they're not allowed to test past TSH unless TSH is out of range. So there has so many limitations. So I think it's about finding a practitioner who can kind of do the testing past that for you and kind of integrate everything, in my experience. Yeah.
I mean, connected with that, there's a question I think you were going to ask that you didn't, about the relationship between these natural approaches and IVF. And it's very connected with your question. You know, if somebody comes, they've been trying to conceive for a while and there's no anatomical reason why they shouldn't, and it's so-called unexplained in NHS terms, that is absolutely no justification for IVF. It's an invasive, serious procedure and it involves surgery as well. And what we do actually works best with the so-called unexplained, because as Francesca said, we're getting to the fundamentals. We're getting the nutrients tip-top, we're getting the toxins out, we're getting them off their ultra-processed food. If that doesn't work, which in my experience, and unfortunately the average age of people who come to see me is like 42, but given that, I would say about 50% of people conceive within a year using totally natural methods. But for those who don't, and then go on to do IVF, almost all of them succeed, and succeed first time and have very few side effects. Because one of the major things IVF does, even more than ordinary pregnancy, is drain all the zinc out of your body. And if your zinc is tip-top before you begin, it's probably going to work, and it's probably going to work first time. So the order of events should be, with any condition, not just infertility, the natural, safe, herbal and nutritional approaches first. Mostly that will sort it out. If it doesn't, then the high-tech, fancy boys with their toys stuff like IVF, then it comes into its own, but it should be not the first resort.
It's also, you know, I see a lot of people with IVF, they go for IVF and they see someone like myself and then they go for IVF again. And the difference in their markers is that, you know, we see AMH, which is sort of, you know, doctors often say you can't change AMH levels. I've seen it change rapidly by increasing vitamin D to the right level, you know.
Ditto sperm counts. They can go from virtually 0 to normal in 4 months of proper nutritional treatment.
I think also going back to your question about integrating, when we're talking about fertility, perhaps a better sort of mindset is almost to think about preparing that much earlier, rather than, you know, if you think about your reason for it going to a doctor, there's possibly a medical problem that you think there might be needing addressing, but preparation for fertility before you get there, I think most women don't think about it until they're ready to have a baby. But actually thinking about it way in advance and preparing for it, both yourself and your partner, rather than thinking that there will need to be medical intervention, would be a much nicer mindset and a much better, more productive approach.
And if you think about it, fertility is your vitality as well, isn't it? If you're ovulating well and you're getting it's progesterone, you're getting the mental health benefits, you're getting the sleep, you're feeling more vibrant and vital. And so it's sort of not just for your fertility, but just because you feel really good as well.
See, I agree completely, but you need to be realistic and know that none of that is on the medical curriculum, right? So, and it's still the same today. I was teaching at a medical school quite recently, and it's just as it was when I trained. I started in 1976. In 6 years, 1 hour of nutrition. And as I now know, sadly, that hour was wrong as well. And the way in which it was wrong, it's crucial for you to understand, right? We were told that vitamins and minerals were substances needed in minuscule quantities to prevent deficiency diseases, right? So your B12 was to stop you dying of pernicious anemia. Your vitamin D was to stop you getting rickets. And your vitamin C was to stop you dying of scurvy. We all have sufficient amounts to stop us getting those fatal diseases. They do not recognize there is a spectrum from being dead to being full of vitality, as you described. There is a spectrum of health, and we all need vastly, vastly more vitamins, minerals, and so on, than the government's normal ranges say. And the government's normal ranges are based on completely out-of-date, 100-year-old science. But nevertheless, you get your vitamin D tested by your GP, they will say it's normal when it isn't. And the others they won't even test. So unfortunately, they know nothing about nutrition, and their normal ranges are also wrong for thyroid hormone testing. Completely wrong. So, sorry, they're doing their best, but they haven't got a good toolkit.
Oh, a few more questions. Oh, goodness, quite a lot. Okay, one here first, and then we'll go to you.
So I do agree that being aware of it is the first step towards having control. But realistically, when we talked about so many areas that we would need to act on, when we take into consideration the financial, time, and lifestyle factors, how achievable is actually a sustainably detoxing lifestyle?
I think it's really sustainable when you start small. You know, we often tell our clients, when you finish one product, like a body cream or whatever it is, a shampoo, just make a more conscious decision the next time. You know, you don't need to sort of panic throw everything out and change everything in your house. Just take it one thing at a time, and eventually over that year, you have a much more low tox house. You know, finish a candle, great, get rid of that, buy an essential oil. So I think just taking it in those little steps can be really, really helpful.
Yeah, one thing at a time, absolutely. And it also depends on the incentive. I mean, when couples came to see me who were desperate to conceive and couldn't, they were desperate enough that they changed their entire lifestyles. You know, it is a question of prioritizing. And in regard to food, I mean, you'll know that in the 50s and 60s, we spent 33% of our income on food. Now it's down to 8%. You know, I have had people sit in my consultations and say things like, oh, I can't afford all this organic food. By the way, can we reschedule the next consultation because I'll be in Barbados? Priorities. I wish I could get my vitamin D in Barbados.
I think to your point, though, there are phrases being banded around sort of anxiety related to concerns of this nature where we think, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong. And there are some, you know, we call them the worried well, but I mean, actually, if you want to kind of be perfect at everything, you will change everything, but that can therefore create its own level of anxiety. And we haven't really even sort of talked or touched on the effect of stress, really. You know, you've talked a little bit about cortisol and whatever, but, you know, the reality is we can end up getting really quite stressed about this. So little bits, little changes, accomplish one thing, make it a new habit, move on, make a new habit, move on, till actually nothing's new. It's just, that's just your new norm.
And you never need to get to 100% either.
Yeah.
You know, we can't aim for perfection. If you make 80% of the changes in the course of a year or two, you make a transformational difference to your health and your chances of conceiving.
Louise had a question. Sorry, Louise had a question at the back.
Hi. So I know we're talking about fertility, but at the other end of the scale, you mentioned UPFs and dementia. Is there any evidence that care homes changing diet plans or anything could improve
Sadly
Dementia?
not, no. And, there is now a lot of evidence. I mean, we talk about methylation, for example. Again, there is evidence of poor methylation being related to poor mental health and early onset dementia and Alzheimer's. And, it's very, very difficult to try and make people aware of the need to change, let alone what to change and when to change and how to change. So yes, there's a whole load of education that needs to happen, but no, it's not happening, and certainly not in care homes. It's really up to the individual to control the controllables.
Yeah, I mean, dementia can absolutely be prevented. I would recommend Patrick Holford's book, Upgrade Your Brain. It's more or less everything you need to know is in there. It's not a small book, but it's quite easy to read. We have about 1 million people in this country with dementia. Go back 100 years ago, we had almost nothing. This is not a normal consequence of aging. If you read Dickens, you will know plenty of people in the 19th century in their 80s and 90s with all their marbles, and they did not spend their last 10 years in a kind of hideous twilight decline, needing looking after, right? I mean, we're being told that all these chronic degenerative disease epidemics are a result of an aging population. They're not, actually. And there's lots of arguments in both my books explaining why they're not. But Alzheimer's first patient was a woman of 51, and he called it pre-senile dementia. That is the point. If your neighbour who's 93 can't remember your kids' names, fine, that's normal. But if your neighbour who's 53 can't remember your kids' names, the brain is being damaged by all these lipophilic toxins, by ultra-processed food, and most of all by lack of the good stuff. The antioxidants, which are in fresh fruit and vegetables, is the most important form of prevention.
Fresh. That's the other point, actually. Yeah,
fresh, local, organic.
Yeah, I think local is something, again, that we forget about. We do, obviously not necessarily in the middle of London, but we do have a huge number of, we have some great farmers in this country producing some fantastic produce, but we're not always made aware of it. Going back to the grains, actually, if I can just mention hodmedod's, I don't know if you've come across, but they're amazing. If we want to yes, they're herbs, and grains and pulses. If you want to diversify just one thing in your diet, look at hodmedod's. So it's HODMEDODS. Based in the east of England, and they're doing some great stuff. We've got so much available to us, but it is about using what we have and, consuming real food.
Are there any more questions? Oh, yeah.
So I've got a question for Jenny G, and it's on the organic farming. I'm from Yorkshire, and a recent chat down the pub with the local farmers about organic versus conventional farming. It was mentioned that organic farmers are permitted to use a chemical like Roundup once every 5 years, and I wonder how true
Not
that
if they're
is.
Soil Association certified, they're not.
Yeah.
With any kind of certification, there's always going to be people jumping on the bandwagon and diluting it. So now you've got organic farmers and growers and other compromise organisations which allow their farmers to be certified with those kinds of compromises. If you want to be certain that it's really organic and definitely will never have seen Roundup, which is glyphosate, and there's a book about glyphosate by Stephanie Seneff called Toxic Legacy, well worth reading, then you need to get Soil Association certified. And with food, it's illegal to call it organic if it's not. But with cosmetics and these non-food products and your shampoo and conditioner, it is shocking that even if it's got only 1% organic ingredients, you're allowed to label it organic. So how do you know what cosmetic products are truly organic? You look on the Soil Association website's health and beauty pages, and what they certify, or what is certified by Cosmos, which is the international equivalent of the Soil Association, that is genuinely safe.
Another question? Yes, please.
I just wanted to ask a question about things like omega-3s. So obviously our oceans are becoming very toxic, and there's like this rising heavy metals that are occurring and ingested and found in the fish. And so when we tell people to then take things like omega-3 or cod liver oil, where does the balance come in? I want to eradicate toxins and heavy metals, and I have low omega-3s. So how do we navigate around that?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, obviously, we talk about cod liver oil. We've talked about liver being the detoxifying organ. Where is the most amount of toxin, or where are the largest number of toxins going to be in the fish, in their liver? So the omega-3 supplement will be as clean as the waters within which the fish were caught. So that's what you have to look for. I don't know about you guys, I mean, you probably have a perspective on like, you know, where you get your supplements from, but I would go for, I choose ones from the Nordic countries, where I believe the waters are the cleanest. So the omega-3 would come from that region.
It's really scary how many omega-3s, when they're tested, are actually rancid as well. You know, like, do not buy it from a high street store. Nordic countries definitely, and Nordic Labs is quite a good brand. But yeah, it's a really hard thing with eating fish, you know, aiming for smaller fish, obviously, is best in the food chain. But around fertility, you know, it's an individual decision as to whether people, you know, what kind of fish they eat, how much fish they eat, how toxic they are, what their toxic load is on that person. It's really hard in the modern world, but aim for smaller fish, and definitely like very good quality fish oils that you don't just buy from the high street.
Yeah, I would absolutely second that. You're right, it's a huge dilemma. I think if you do everything else right, and you've got all your good minerals tip-top and all your vitamins in your system that will help your liver detox enzymes, then on balance you can cope with a tiny amount of heavy metals you will get from fish. But as Francesca says, you want the smaller fish, the sardines, the tiny ones, the anchovy sardines. Mackerel is okay, salmon is a whole other thing, but definitely not tuna, because the mercury and the other toxins get concentrated up the food chain. So the bigger the fish, the more toxic it is. In terms of fish oils, I also rate Nordic naturals, but there is this obsession with omega-3. We do need the good omega-6 as well, ideally not taken at the same time, because the same enzyme processes both of them. It's called delta-6 desaturase, and it can't work without zinc. So if you can't normalize the omega-3 and 6 levels, it's probably zinc deficiency. You need to deal with that. But you need some evening primrose oil as well, because that is the balance that the brain needs, I think.
But they don't recommend tuna to kids under like 3. So we know that it's really heavy in metals. So, you know, if we're not recommending it to our babies, why do we want to eat it?
Yeah. And there's also the question of vegan omega-3, like walnut oil and flaxseed oil and so on, have a form of omega-3 that we're supposed to be able to convert to what the brain needs, which is EPA and particularly DHA, which are already made in fish oil. I found in practice, in testing, that virtually nobody can do that conversion, which is one of the problems for women being long-term vegan.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up our panel here, and I know that it's been completely fascinating for me, so hopefully it's been equally fascinating for all of you. I'd like to very much thank Francesca, Jenny G and Jenny T for all of their knowledge and tips and wonderful advice today. So please give them all a round of applause. Okay. And both Jennies will be available at the back of the room with their books if you want to buy and get one signed. That would be great. And we do have a little bit more time if you want to carry on sampling some of the products here. And I know that there was a new sampler here, Dome, who's just arrived a little bit late. So maybe you want to go and try some of their chocolate with vitamins. There we go. So, yeah, so thank you all very much. Carry on browsing. Thank you.